day. I don't know now.
All righty. Hey, Bruce, thank you so much. Appreciate your service. I know you've been very dedicated to the arts. Thank you. Okay, next up is, well, we just heard from Parks and Rec, bicycle and pedestrian.
Good evening, Mayor, and Council, and staff. So I'm going to let Sean Reedy start off with our number one goal. It's something that he works on individually and brings it back to the commission level. So I'm going to let him go over that first.
Hi, Sean Reedy, speaking again tonight. So yeah, our first goal has to do with safe routes to school. It's something that has both short-term and long-term parts. Some of them are waiting on some things having to do with Measure B and a lawsuit. Let me start with some of the stuff that's happening right now. We, as a commission, we support safe routes to school activities and planning. We attend planning meetings at schools. We participate in encouragement activities at schools. Like I mentioned earlier in the meeting, we have walking school buses going at some schools ranging from daily to weekly. We have bike trains happening that are getting kids biking to school. We participate in helping make sure that those things are happening safely. We participate in helping with educational activities. We have bike rodeos happening at the schools where 4th and 5th graders are being trained in how to ride a bike safely in traffic conditions, and so that they're not just out there behaving in a way that ends up putting them in danger. So the city currently is participating in an engineering role, and Naron is here tonight, Naron Than. He's been very helpful attending planning meetings and helping make sure that the schools, the principals and people at the schools get things they need to make it safer. For example, at Rod Kelly School and those intersections we talked about earlier with Kern and Welburn and Mantelli, and at Welburn we have new safety features out there in the middle of the intersection to help make sure that it's safer for the kids to get across and safer for the crossing guards to be working there. They put in no U-turn signs, red paint on the curbs, and that happened very quickly with engineering support. Police department's involved on enforcement level, but also they educate 5th graders. In the past, they've done bike rodeos. They currently don't have grants for that. Our advisement currently, this is why it's on our work plan, but we're waiting to see Measure B lawsuit gets resolved. Our advisement currently is that there be a coordinator position eventually with Measure B funds to help coordinate all the different pieces of safe routes to school that are happening. There are many different stakeholder groups, and there's lots of different elements to it. Education, encouragement, engineering, evaluation, and without somebody coordinating, what's happened in the past is there's been safe routes to school in Gilroy, but it's fallen apart to where almost nothing's happening. And so we don't want that to happen again. There's a lot of, nearly $2 million in county grant money has been put into this over the last handful of years, and we don't want that to end up resulting in everything falling apart again if there's no further funding from the county. And we do foresee that there will be money from Gilroy that could be utilized to try to keep what's been going on to some level to continue it. And so currently we are working with National Safe Routes to School to create an action plan, and that's in process right now. We had a meeting in April, and we have a follow-up meeting in June where there's an action plan being made to make sure that we have a short-term and long-term plan to keep safe routes to school going. And what we foresee happening from that is a task force developing where these different stakeholders that are involved can continue to meet together, perhaps quarterly, to get all these different things done that are happening. That's all I have on safe routes to school, unless there's questions about it now or after Zach speaks.
Number 2 is the outdoor BMX track. So what we want to do is, again, get either a dirt pump track, an asphalt pump track, and we're working with the Parks and Rec Commission and city staff to get the wording of such projects in the Parks Master Plans. We are always looking for similar projects, such as the city of Watsonville is converting one of their old skate parks into a pump track right now. So I've reached out to that staff member, and we have a good conversation back and forth. I also got contacted by a planner from Santa Clara County Parks. They have plans to put in a pump track at Harvey Bear. So we opened up that same dialogue and trying to, work with each other and figure out like local vendors and what works. So what we would like to see is some sort of report prepared for the exact steps needed and costs associated with getting the land at the Gilroy Sports Park ready to build and design. That's one of the biggest hurdles. It's not necessarily building the entire thing, but actually just small little steps. That's where we can hopefully come into play in the next budget cycle, whether it's just getting the design or allocating so much money to get that land into that sort of use. As an alternative, what are the steps and costs associated with building a smaller scale BMX track, whether it's a dirt pump track or asphalt pump track at a current City of Gilroy park? The group that operates a BMX track down in Gilroy, they've gained experience on what it takes to run a track here in Gilroy, and they actually are ready to make a presentation for that. They'll have a presentation and business plan by the summer. That was something that was a task that was given to them, and they heard that last year during the budget process. They've been researching grants, private funding to make park operational and sustainable. They've also been working with the Chamber of Commerce. Number 3, and we actually picked this up from 2 different sources. Number 1 was the mayor's state of the city, and that's building of a second Paseo walkway and activating Gourmet Alley between 4th and 5th into a bicycle pedestrian facility while enhancing Gourmet Alley into like a destination for food and shopping. So it's basically activating the back side of those spaces. And they actually talked about this at the Planning Commission meeting this week about whether it's, certain conditions of restaurant or whatever up front, retail, and then something different coming out the back. That came from the design committee from the GDBA, which I'm involved in and trying to listen to what they're saying. So those conversations, it's obviously not something that we can be a part of like the building and plans, but what we can do is be advocates for you. Okay, so when the training that you're going to see in a moment, those kind of training opportunities, we can meet other people that have developed these successful destinations and what worked and what didn't work and what grants are out there. In our strategic plan, we've identified, I don't know, maybe more than like 10 to 12 grant opportunities and when they're coming up. And at each of our meetings, all we need to do is just give a couple details that Gary has actually asked us to get for him, just a couple numbers right off the bat. And, so we're constantly looking and going through all that. Number 4 is design and build a bicycle pedestrian bridge from the top of Hecker Pass, that Class 1 trail that's going to extend all the way out to Burchell Road. I rode it the other day. You can literally throw a stone over Uvis Creek and be able to access Gilroy Gardens. So cycling and walking along Hecker Pass Trail, which connects all the way to the sports park, people are walking in there, and the activity there is increasing. The demand to access Gilroy Gardens by bike ped is here. It's not something that's in the future. It's now. The Water District has grants to support a bike and pedestrian bridge. In order to attract older youth to Gilroy Gardens, it needs to be an easier way for them to ride and walk together to get to Gilroy Gardens. And so this is another one. We can bite off a little tiny chunk in the next budget cycle, whether it's not building a bridge, but it's what's the cost associated just to get a design to build a pedestrian bridge. Something that's been successful around the area, or maybe one that's already been currently built. Getting that shovel ready. So that way, if we do go after a grant through the Water District, we already have the designs and everything ready to go. We just tell them, here, it's shovel ready, here you go. Number 5 is implement green bicycle lanes. We'd like to begin a pilot program to assist with public outreach. Gilroy, I said this at our annual meeting, is that Gilroy is the only city left in Santa Clara County that doesn't use green bike lanes. We have the support from our city transportation engineer in developing a pilot program and doing public outreach and on the use of green bike lanes in these areas that are in high volume where you have a higher, vehicles versus bikes. And obviously the biggest one would probably be including the schools. Because if we are activating and we're making people do all these safe routes to schools, I'm telling you, I live on 3rd Street, and just the amount of kids and people going back and forth, and I know they're going all the way up to the Hecker Pass Trail now too, and they're working there all the way down. So being ahead of that collision, I think would work. And it's really not that expensive if you were just to do like 20 feet into an intersection. It's not thousands and thousands of dollars. And there's grants for that too. And just for members of the public and for you both too, you can find this work plan that I just went over, our strategic plan. You can find them all on our website, which is in the city's website. If you can't find it, just search Gilroy Bike Ped. You'll find several articles that we've written. You'll find our strategic plans and how to get in contact with all of us too. So that concludes our work plan.
Thank you. Council, any questions for the commission?
Just one quick question. Zach, thanks for the presentation. And I know I've been involved in the Safe Routes to School since September. I think you guys are doing great work, and we've had a lot of support from Melissa, and I think that's what the recognition was for last month or last week. Just in regards to all of these projects, I mean, a lot of them are already underway with staff. Are there, I mean, do you have any ideas of how we could get some synergies between staff and the commissions? Let me give you an example here. You've talked about the BMX, so did Park and Recs. How do we create synergies? Parks and Recs talked about, improving the bike and pedestrian trails through, perhaps Christmas Hill Park. So did you. You're talking about connecting the trail over to Gilroy Gardens. But how do we create the synergies so there's not a multiplication of efforts and people doing different things at the same time?
So I've heard that before too. We don't want a duplication of efforts. In advocacy, there is no duplication of efforts. Being an advocate, and that's basically what these commissions are. We're appointed by you folks to be advocates in these specific items. So just because we're advocating for a trail at Christmas Hill Park, I would assume that we're going to be talking with the chair and talking with all their commissions the same. There's no, it's not like, one commission is trying to jockey for support of one thing and not, we do all talk to each other, and that's including into staff. We're very open about what we want to do and what we want to get done. And when we bring that up at our commission meetings, it might be an idea that's thrown out, but I make sure that I always communicate anything with Patricia, and she communicates back and forth to me. It's open like that. I don't talk to any other staff members besides, our traffic engineer and maybe Neuron, just for, work stuff, but that's it.
Okay. Great, thanks.
Okay. Council, anything else? Okay. So we've heard the work plans. Gabe, was there more staff presentation?
Certainly, Mayor and Council, there's still the final piece, which is staff's presentation of the Bicycle Pedestrian Commission's request to amend, to the council, to amend the city ordinance granting them additional authority and duties. So, Bryce?
Yes, Mayor, Council. So the Bike Ped Commission was created by Ordinance number 2009-03. It was originally a subcommittee of Parks and Rec, I believe. Originally, the request was submitted in June of 2017. That was when the assessment was first underway. It was decided to wait until the assessment report was done. The requested changes include review of the CIP projects, early review of private and public development projects, recommend policies for acquisition, development, improvement of bicycle and pedestrian facilities, and to advise with respect to offers of donations for money, personal property, or real estate to be used for bicycle and pedestrian purposes. So staff is recommending against making changes to the verbiage in the existing Bike Ped Commission ordinance. Staff feels the existing duties and powers are broadly defined and that the requested additions are already included in the existing duties and powers.
Is that it? Okay. Back to council. Councilmember Tucker.
So in regards to everything else except the BPAD, I don't think there's direction to staff on that, right? Just receive report and continue as you want a discussion about training dollars, right, on the rest. But in regard to the changes that are being recommended, I'm supportive of them. Either we are going to be serious about safe routes to school and or focus on pedestrian safety as well as bicycle safety, then we need to include them. And I think there should be a way to be able to do it without extending any development. They could be in parallel. Maybe they could change, if we have to, change their meeting day or time, or they have a special meeting to, if something's going to the Planning Commission, they could do it right before, the day before, the day after, or something so that it wouldn't extend the time of the development. But if we weren't going to be really serious and be focused on public safety, then I don't see any problem with these changes.
Councilmember Harney.
I agree with Councilmember Tucker. I mean, you know, one of the things that I've seen over the last few years is this lack of engagement from the community or filling the positions, and then when the positions are filled, we see you know, high level of absenteeism for whatever the reasons may be, and then people dropping out before their term. I think the chart, you know, says it best on the number of people that have turned over. So to me, you know, the commissions, it's all about empowering the commissions, and it's all about making sure that their voice, that they're collecting and summarizing and providing direction to the council on the voice of the community. So, you know, there's just a couple of comments here. There's some common threads that I saw in the presentation tonight, which is, you know, they've gone ahead and updated the strategic plan, their strategic plans, but they're not necessarily completely aligned with our strategic plan. Our strategic plan hasn't been released yet, as far as I know. So it's kind of difficult to get that alignment and have it cascade, and I think that's where it should be. So that's the first thing. The second thing is just with the public outreach. I think some of the things we see is that, you know, the public isn't aware of all the work that the commission is doing. So when I hear the Parks and Rec want to be at downtown events, I encourage that. You know, Sue Ostrander's not here, maybe she is, but the Planning and Community Development Group was at the recent health fair, and the feedback that they got was incredible. That was downtown at the beginning of May. So I would support that as well. But, you know, coming back to, if we're talking about the bike and ped ordinance, I do support the change, and I don't necessarily agree with staff's recommendation. This is a commission that has been out front and center in the public. They've made a meaningful difference to a lot of the schools and to a lot of people that do want to bike and hike. And I think I do value their input when it comes to our capital improvement project list. I think it would be helpful to have their input and to understand where they're coming from. And maybe sometimes we're out of touch. And so I think having that extra additional voice is something that I feel strongly about. And I'm not going to support staff's recommendation. In fact, I'm going to ask other councils to consider how we can continue to use the commissions, especially exemplary commissions like this one.
Councilmember Blankley.
Sorry. Yes, I think it amazes me to see people give so much of their time for, I mean, we get peanuts. They don't even get peanuts for the time that they put into this. So it's something to be applauded. My question is more around, I understand staff's position about what they're requesting is already in the vague descriptions that are there, but that being specific is more preferable for anybody who really cares about what they're doing. So my question is, what exactly is the cost? Does staff have a cost that they see to adding this in? I mean, I read the report, I know that, but I'm kind of thinking that's not a strong enough answer. Is there actually a numerical cost that if we were to have the same language in all the other commissions would somehow kill us? Whoever I'm asking.
I don't.
Andy or Gabe? Well, I'm asking staff.
Certainly, Mayor and Council, this is more of the referring to the streamlining on the development side. So you have two issues. One, you have the inclusion of boards and commissions in, taking for example, when you have development projects, right? You already come to Parks and Recreation, you got Public Art Commission that reviews, now you're adding Bicycle and Pedestrian Commission. So that's just adding, it's not so much the cost of staff that's significant, but it's adding time to the process when we're already heavily criticized by the development community of how long it takes for the projects to get through. So you're basically just adding another layer to that process that is counterintuitive to what we're trying to do, which is streamline the process for the development community. So you could always adopt something on a pilot program that we can measure and see if that's adding anything to the development process, so we can measure and see what the development community impacts is going to be, if any, then be able to bring that back to you as well. So that's the position that staff's coming from, is that additional layer to the already process that we get heavily criticized.
Yeah, thanks, Gabe. That's kind of exactly what you said in the staff report. So I know. I'm just wondering why that has to be. Nothing in government moves very quickly, ever. So why, I don't understand why it has to be an added layer. And maybe it's just because I don't understand, because I am very much in support of not making things take longer, not making our process be more cumbersome than it already is. In fact, I'm trying to accomplish the opposite. So I appreciate that. But it seems to me that there ought to be a way to let our commissions weigh in. They already weigh in. They already are supposed to have the authority to weigh in as it is. So it's almost sounding like putting in this language is just making staff adhere to what they should be doing already. No?
So, if I may.
Yeah.
So that's why the existing language in our review of it and interpretation is vague enough to allow council to already, without having very specific language in this, not just this particular commission, but any other commission, the language as it exists today is broad enough to allow you as policy decision makers to direct any commission in terms of their role, because they are advisory to you and bring recommendations to you. So you already have that latitude in the existing language to say, we want to incorporate the Bike and Ped Commission in the development review process, right? Without actually saying that in the powers and authorities, just like any other commission. So again, in reviewing that language, I'm not sure when it was actually the ordinance, but it might have been written with intent to allow flexibility for for the council to be able to have the commissions in whatever advisory capacity to provide that to you.
Okay. Councilmember Blankley, anything else?
No, I was asking Andy, do you want to say that into the microphone or no?
Councilmember Blankley asked if I had an opinion.
Andy, do you want to be put on the spot or no?
I think I just was. And my opinion was that there's nothing really wrong with having a commission review development proposals at some stage. However, it's quite possible that it will add time to the process, because you have to schedule meetings, staff reports have to be written. What if the meeting can't be done and there's no quorum that day or something? So I think it's realistic to say that these are conflicting goals. On the one hand, of getting input from a variety of perspectives, including the commissions. On the other hand, as Gabe mentioned, staff gets criticized for delays in the development process. And there was talk of a developer's bill of rights at a recent meeting, for example, and there has been criticism of the delays in the process. So if one adds a mandatory stage, that potentially adds more delay. And so it's sort of a conflicting set of policies that I think council has to resolve.
Okay, thank you. Back to Councilmember Blankley. Anything else? Councilmember Tovar.
Thank you, Mayor. And I think Andy just sort of hit it right on the nose there. Is we have to sort of come up with a solution. I'm in favor of the proposed additions that have been presented, but we ultimately need to figure out the answer to the question you just brought up: time, staff, and is it going to be possible? So, I mean, again, I think I would like to figure that out before we approve anything. I mean, I'm in favor of the proposal, but I just worry that we're not going to have the time or staff to realistically, be able to move forward with this. So I guess that's my concern. I mean, I am in favor of this, but the other thing too I wanted to ask, and maybe this is for the city manager, And again, I thank all the commissioners and all the commissions for the work and the dedication you guys put into it. And I see a lot of you at events and representing the city and doing great work. One of the things that I hear a lot from different commission members is something simple as not having a business card. I mean, is that something that we can supply our commissioners with? Again, because I know they're out there talking to the community members, and I said, do you want one of your cards? And they tell me they don't have one. So I don't know if that's even realistic, if we've done that in the past. Gabe?
Yeah, Mayor and Council, my understanding is that the city has not in the past provided business cards. So you have 15 boards and commissions, and they range from anywhere between 5 members up to 7.
Yeah.
So it's just more of a budgetary cost. Alternatively, we can offer the commissioners for them to purchase their own and at our cost from our printer. But historically, my understanding is the city has not provided that.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Councilmember Tucker.
So actually, I still have some of my planning commission business cards. Just saying. Patricia was our admin back then, and because I didn't use them that much, but you do use them when you're out in the public. You do pass them out. People ask who you are. You get your nameplate. That's back in the early 2000s when I was on the. But that's not what I was. I just wanted to clarify. Not in the recent past, let's say.
Thank you for letting us know you still have your planning commission business cards.
I didn't want to throw them away. They're cute.
Yeah, did you pay for those, or did
anyways.
the city? Councilmember Tucker, sorry, did you pay for those, or did the city pay for those?
The city paid for them.
Okay.
I was chair of the planning commission for a couple of years, so I don't know. I did use them. What I wanted to say, though, this is not why I raised the button. So I don't want to confuse the point of streamlining the developers and all the permitting and all that had, and my focus was not to eliminate advisory commission's opinions. The focus for streamlining those areas was with staff, with all the steps that went through at City Hall. And so I appreciate that there's a goal to streamline processes for the developers and for other permitting people, but the fact is the Citizens Advisory Committee members are there to advise us, and I want to hear their advice. And it's valuable to me if I have something before us that's kind of like, I'm not sure, how does this affect this? How does this affect, in particular, pedestrian or traffic circulation or any of these other things? So I do want their input, and I don't want it to be vague, and I don't want it to be, oh, well, there wasn't enough good time on the timeline, so we bypass the BPAC, or we bypass Parks and Rec, or we bypassed somebody else. The only reason why it always goes to planning is the state requirement. And so, I understand about streamlining, but that doesn't pertain to getting, why else do we have people on the commissions if we don't get their advice? So that's my comment.
Thank you, Councilmember Tucker. Councilmember Harney.
That's very well said, Councilmember Tucker. Thank you for articulating that so well. One of the biggest problems that I have is trying to get the information right. So this past week, I watched the Planning Commission, and be it as it may, the Planning Commission. The meetings I've watched aren't always full of dialogue. It's usually staff presenting and 1 or 2 questions coming up. And I've always begged myself to ask a question. Is it because of training? Is it because they don't know what type of questions to ask? Or is it that they really don't have any questions? But I can't say that I can watch the other commission meetings, right? And so then that leaves me to staff reports. And usually the staff reports don't include the comments from the different commissions, which means I then have to go back and figure out a way to hear the voice of the commissioners, which is painstakingly going through the roster and getting the phone numbers and calling them, as I did with Commissioner Fisher today. Thank you for taking my call. But anyhow, my point is that if the commissioners feel like they're being bypassed in the process, then we have a problem. And I think that's some of what we're hearing. And so that's why I'm not supportive of the staff recommendation. I think we do need to hear more from them, and we do need to make sure that their goals are aligned with our goals. And when they're not, we need to say that. We need to say this doesn't align, or we don't have the capital funding for that, or that isn't a priority for us right now. And oftentimes we don't have that opportunity. So that's where I stand with it.
Thank you. Anybody else from the council? Okay, Gabe has the staff. Yes.
Just very briefly, I can appreciate both sides of the argument here in terms of making sure that there's formalized avenue for input from the Bike Ped Commission on the one hand versus us making sure we're being, and staff is being as expedient as possible in terms of working through projects and keeping those on a suitable timeline for all parties concerned. You know, my thing is as I look at this, Zach has been a regular at our meetings, showing up and giving us his input and things like that. So I don't know that we necessarily need a formalized step in the process. That's just my own take. But I would certainly encourage you to continue to show up. Every project, let us know. You can certainly do your own due diligence. And if you want to email us ahead of time, I think that would also be helpful as well. But I do want to make sure that as we continue to push for expediency of staff time and projects, that we don't make that any more difficult than it already is.
Thank you. Councilmember Blankley.
Not to put people on the spot, but I do see at least one in the audience. Any developer types that might want to comment on how you think this would affect your application if we approved this?
So, Councilmember, how about you take a step back and let me finish running the meeting, and let me call up those folks up here, okay? Is there any public comment?
Jane Howard and Zach Hilton.
I'm up there, sir.
Oh, I'm sorry, Councilmember Bracco. Jane, please come on up. Councilmember Bracco.
Yes, and I'm listening to this, and it was about a month ago that we're calling our staff on the carpet for taking too long on these projects, and you need to streamline things, and now we're putting more roadblocks in front of the process. I believe all of our commissions have the ability to chime in on projects, but for you know, I was on the Planning Commission. I was on the Historic Heritage Committee, and if the commission members, well, we want to know about this. Well, they don't have the answer. Okay, we'll have to go back. They meet once a month, so that's another month delay. And then they don't like this. It'll get out of hand, I'm sure. I would agree to Gabe's proposal of a pilot project to see how it goes. But when you take all of our commissions, because they're all going to want the same authority, you could add a year to a project and then have meetings griping at staff, how come this is taking so long? Because the developers will call because they're all tied up. So I can't support this right the way it is.
Thank you. Okay, council, as a reminder, we'll be coming back to the council. So let's go ahead and hear from the public first, starting with Jane Howard, followed by Suzanne. Who's next?
Zach Hilton, then Chris Vonnie.
Okay.
Great, thank you. Jane Howard, Gilroy Welcome Center. I just want to follow up on the Arts and Culture Commission projects that they've listed, and to inform council that the Gilroy Welcome Center Board of Directors has actually approved Kevin Heath from the Gilroy Arts Alliance to join the board. He has his orientation tomorrow, and he'll be joining us in June, so I think it ties in nicely to what is being proposed here in terms of expanding our community outreach for arts-related events and programs. That was something the Board of Directors recognized, and so Kevin will be joining us, and we'll have that component as part of what this particular project calls for.
Great, thank you. Zach?
Good evening, Mayor and Council. So first of all, the ordinance was created in 2009. That's when the Parks and Rec Commission split it off and became a bicycle pedestrian commission. So I just want to remind you guys that, we're appointed by you, our elected officials, to serve as advocates in areas that we are trained for. If you want us to be a part of the process, it needs to be put in writing. This is for succession planning of our commission too, so that those that follow, will be a part of the process. We're not just talking about the development part, and I'll mention that in a second because it's getting out of hand. But one moment. The first one is that for us to be included in the CIP process, we were left out of that last year. All that stuff gets turned into finance at the end of the year. So this fall, all the departments will come up with their budgets and all their ideas and stuff like that, and then it'll start being reviewed in front of you. So we basically got pushed. We weren't a part of the process. Parks and Rec Commission wasn't a part of the process. I was at the meeting where they had to fight to get to even see the CIP, and even then it was told, well, it's already been submitted. So sure, we can show it to you, but nothing's going to change. And as far as the development review, we already see all the developments. That's not what I'm asking about at all. In 2012, you guys created a complete streets policy. That documentation that I want to add to the ordinance is already in the complete streets policy. We have already seen the cannery. We've already seen Glen Loma. We've already seen all those and had the opportunity to weigh in. And I'll tell you, it goes months, and then it goes to planning, and then months it goes to you guys. That's how I'm able to weigh in on everything. It's not because I was watching the videos. It's because they came to our commission. So we do get to work with developers, and we get to hear all about the bike ped features that they have to offer. So it's not adding any other layers. But just so you know, too, they have the ability to ask us. There's only 3 of us need to be a quorum. They can ask for a special meeting whenever they want. And it happened last year where I believe it was Stub Chair couldn't make it to a meeting, and it had to be with the levee trail. They had the grant funding to fix the levee trail. He couldn't make it, so our staff liaison, our recording secretary, called us up and said, hey, I just want to get 3 of you there. Is there a way we can get 3 of you? And all 5 of us showed up in 2 days. And he was able to make his presentation, and we formally approved it, and he was on his way. That can happen at any time. We live here. So it's not like we don't have to commute anywhere to make a meeting at 6 o'clock. A special meeting can be called at any time. Yeah, so again, the verbiage, none of the suggested changes were made up. I didn't make up any of them. They all came from commissions that are already in the charter. So all the language was already in there. And like, again, I truly believe that if you want to leave it vague, I understand it's always up for interpretation, but it just requires more hoops for us to go through to get our voice heard. So that's it. That's all I have to say.
Thank you. Chris Vonnie.
Good evening, Council. Chris Vonnie, developer. Thank you, Marie, for calling me out. I was actually going to speak on another item. But with regard to the time it takes to get projects through, development projects through, it does take forever and a day. And it's very difficult, particularly on smaller projects, which is what you see a lot of going on in Gilroy, your infill projects, which Measure H is supposedly wants to see happen. Those projects don't have a lot of room for error, and they definitely don't have a lot of room for a lot of time. You know, the concept of time value of money eats into every dollar that sits there on property. And the way properties are financed nowadays is different than they were 10, 15, 20 years ago. Most of the time the land is bought in cash up front, held. All the development costs are paid by developer up front in cash before they have an entitled project that they can finance, whether it's through traditional financing or through equity partners. And so the longer it takes, the more dramatic the effect on the return on investment, and that is real. It's very real. I think these commissions do have places, and their voices should be heard. As far as adding another layer, another thing to go through, I don't think that is appropriate on most projects. Maybe on some large, significant projects, on your large housing tracts, like we did with Hecker Pass, for example. When we brought the Hecker Pass development through, the Hecker Pass specific plan. We went through a specific plan, did a lot of work through there. Most of the commissions weighed in one way or the other as we went through the process. We then came to a situation, this is years back, some of you guys might remember this, we came to a situation where we were looking at whether we would have to widen 152, cut into the hillsides, or were there other alternatives? And we took a look at the alternative of moving the bike path inside the tree row rather than widening the highway through cutting into the hill to allow for a bike path on the highway. And council and staff said, you know, that sounds interesting. What does the Bike and Ped Commission think about it? Let's meet with them. And so at that point, appropriately, we sat down with the Bike and Ped Commission, outlined what we were looking at, heard what they were thinking, and we came up with a solution that made sense. What did we come up with? The solution was we didn't have to cut into the hillsides. We built we planned for a better path, and it's inside the tree row. And so there's situations where it makes sense to have that direct involvement or that extra layer, especially if the developer's looking to come up with a solution that has a community benefit, such as that. But on your standard, typical, basic, mitigated negative deck type projects, adding another layer, another formality really, I think, just slows it down and is probably not appropriate. It really should be on a case-by-case basis as directed by council and staff appropriately. My 2 cents.
Thank you. Any other speakers? Okay, back to council for discussion. Councilmember Blankley.
If we took out G, would that solve?
I'm sorry, take out what?
If we took out G and just talked about F, H, and I. I'm sorry, isn't that where we are? The proposed, right, the proposed additions. Okay. The proposals are listed as, okay.
What page are you on? I'm sorry.
Packet page 251.
No, two. Oh.
Yeah, 251.
Oh, I'm looking at the red.
Oh. Anyway, it seems to me that G is the one that adds the layer, if you can call it a layer. I mean, from what I heard Zach say, that's not the problem. He's already seeing that anyway. So am I?
Are you
Gabe,
making,
is
that a motion? Because
well, I'm asking Gabe first, is that the one, is that the cause of what you're saying would add a layer, would add time to staff, would possibly conflict with our efforts to streamline?
With regards to the development, yes.
Okay, then I would make a motion that we approve F, H, and I.
Okay, so hang on a second. We have Councilmember Harney next up.
I think that's a good compromise, and I think, we've aired a lot of concerns, and I think that would address them, so I would be supportive of that motion.
Okay. Anybody, Andy?
Just a quick thing. For the record, the way this is agendized, this would be a direction to staff to bring back the ordinance with these changes.
Right.
Right, and go through the normal ordinance
So
process.
my motion would be for staff, to direct staff to.
Okay. So Councilmember Blankley, let's hold on to that, because if you're ready to make a motion, can we start with item A on the agenda?
I started to do last time, but I didn't do it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. On the agenda.
So in the,
How come I'm not seeing anything here? Okay, so, okay, here we go. We have a motion by Councilmember Bracco, seconded by Councilmember Tucker. We're looking at agenda item 3A. It's to receive the report and provide direction to staff, and then we'll take up the Bicycle and Pedestrian Commission separately. I want to ask a clarifying question to Gabe here regarding the draft work plans here. Gabe, can you, the way these plans are formatted, it talks about the 12-month projects, the key tasks, how it fits in with the strategic goals, who's leading it, and then comments. Can you talk a little bit about the comment section?
Certainly, Mayor and Council. The comments was provided by staff in looking at how each of these items fit into the overarching strategic goals of the city, and to just, again, to eliminate any duplication of effort, also to identify what is already underway in terms of some of the work staff is doing for direction from council. So those comments there, so for example, with the bike and pedestrian, it talks about creating a coordinator position. Well, as you know, council, that's a council authority in terms of, one, it's a budgetary discussion that you have as council, and then two, any addition of personnel comes from the city administrator to you. So the comments are just providing some insight in terms of the process associated with each of the goals, just so there's clarification on the work plan that they're proposing.
Okay, so so then I would want to clarify then that when we talk about, when the council talks about receiving the report and providing direction to staff, it's to approve this, the draft work plans, including the comment section. Is that correct?
For me, yes, but I also want to clarify, in all of this, these commissions are only advisory to us. We have the final say, and clearly, if we don't feel we need a coordinator, we don't do it. This is just a recommendation from them to us, and we can say yes or no at the appropriate time. That's how I view it, anyway.
I would agree with you, except that with regards to the Safe Route to School, it talks about their key task is creating this coordinator position, but it goes to your point, though, that any creation of positions and the fiscal impacts, that's our responsibility. Yeah. Okay. And so I'm going to assume, Councilmember Bracco, you're okay with the work plan and the associated comments with it?
Yes.
Okay. And so we have a motion and a second. Please vote on 3A. And that passes unanimously 7-0. Now, Councilmember Blankley, would you like to make a motion for B, 3B?
Yes, I make a motion, this was right here, right? I move that we direct staff to come back with an ordinance, or come back with an ordinance that adds to the Bicycle Pedestrian Commission ordinance the first, third, and fourth items that they had listed. That omits, right, as requested by the Bicycle Pedestrian Commission, except for paragraph G.
So it's
did I say that all right?
Identified as F, H, and I, omitting G. Is that clear to staff and to the council?
Yes, I'll second that, Mr. Mayor.
Mayor, if I may, just for clarification for the record, that's omitting item G from the Bicycle Pedestrian Commission proposed additions, which is page 251.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yes. Yes.
Okay. And Suzanne, I'm not getting my screen up here. Oh, here we go.
So,
All right, there we go. We have a motion by Councilmember Blankley, a seconded by Councilmember Harney to approve the request by the Bicycle Pedestrian Commission to amend the Bicycle Pedestrian Commission ordinance, deleting section G as noted in the staff report, page 251. Please vote. And that passes unanimously. All right, thank you.